Would you rather be a guard or a prisoner?
I don't think I have the qualities to be a guard.
Prisoner.
Prisoner, I guess.
Prisoner. Sounds like it would be a little less work.
Prisoner.
Why's that?
Nobody likes guards.
Hello, welcome to What the Flick. I'm Christy. This is Tim Grierson. That's Alonzo Duraldi. That's Ben Makowitz down there. He's going to describe to you the Stanford Prison Experiment.
The Stanford Prison Experiment is a film based on a real Stanford Prison Experiment in 1971 that Jack and I have talked about so many times on the Young Turks.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
A lot. Because it relates to the manner in which if you let guards have at it, they will have at it with prisoners. You know, it was incredibly relevant at Abu Ghraib, as George Bush would say. This is the story. It was an experiment with 18 men at Stanford over the summer in 1971. 9 of them become guards. 9 of them are prisoners. An experiment that was supposed to last 2 weeks, and the results shocked the people running the experiment.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. This experiment will be an extension of my research into the effects prisons can have on human behavior.
You're going to be pleased to know that you all have been chosen to be the prison guards.
But under no circumstances whatsoever are you to physically assault the prisoners in any way. So remember, just as you were watching the prisoners, my graduate staff and I will be watching you.
All right, gentlemen, we're gonna have ourselves a lot of fun.
Rule number 1, prisoners must remain silent.
This is an exercise period.
Okay, is it just me, or are these guys taking this thing a bit too seriously?
Why don't you give me 20 push-ups?
Look at this guy. Thinks he's John Wayne or something.
You address me as Mr. Correctional Officer.
This might be an interesting 2 weeks after all.
Why don't you make up your bunk, 8612?
I did, Mr. Correctional Officer.
Well, that's not what I see.
Hey, what are you doing? It's just me now!
What was that?
You just hit him. You're not supposed to hit him.
Should we step in? No. Let the guards figure it out. Let's see where it goes.
Good evening, gentlemen. How about we make this one a night to remember?
This is all real. They won't let you go. They won't let us leave.
Those are not prisoners. Those are not subjects. Those are boys, and you are harming them.
Please! Let me out of here! I want out! I want out now!
You thought you were gonna get some playtime in the yard, boy? Is that what you thought this was gonna be?
Okay, so I've not seen it, and Alonzo can't really review it.
I know the director, Kyle Patrick Alvarez, so yeah, I can talk about the movie, but I can't score it.
Okay, so talk about the movie.
Okay, well, yeah, so I've been saying this is one of those movies like Dazed and Confused or American Graffiti, where in 5 years, everybody in the cast is going to be famous. Like, you've seen a lot of them already. Ezra Miller is in it, Michael Angarano, the Me and Earl and the Dying Girl guy, whose name I never remember.
Oh.
Him, you know, that guy.
Ben will look it up for us.
Ty Sheridan's in it.
Ty Sheridan, Val Kilmer's son, who was so good in Palo Alto. So, like, there's a lot of sort of on-the-cusp young actors in this movie, along with Billy Crudup and Olivia Thirlby and the guy from True Blood and Get On Up, who's so good. Anyway, you know, Kyle's films I think are really interesting. I've been enjoying watching his trajectory as a filmmaker. And this one is different in that it's very kind of enclosed and intense. Actually, it's, in a way, it really kind of relates to his first film, which is a lot of phone calls. So it's also very kind of internalized. You guys talk about it more, because you're actually reviewing it.
I'm a fan of Kyle Patrick Alvarez as well. I don't know him personally, but he's made 3 films: Easier with Practice, COG, and now this one. And one of the things I really like about him as a filmmaker is that each film is pretty remarkably different. I mean, you're right, Easier with Practice does have an intimacy that this movie does too, but it's not nearly as intense as this movie is. One of the things that he has talked about in interviews is that they really, he and the writer really worked to make it as realistic as possible. They had to take some creative license with the ending, which we won't get into, but it is pretty accurate to the actual experience, partly because there's so much footage.
I was going to say, they had
it does exist.
And
I think one of the things I most enjoy about this film is I think that when you have such a famous experiment, you know, this is a 44-year-old experiment now that I think most people know a little bit about, there's sort of a sense of, well, how could this have happened? what was wrong with these people that they could have had these 9 prisoners be brutalized and kind of sadistically kind of tortured by these 9 guards in an experiment that's being monitored. And I think the movie does a great job kind of moment by moment showing how ordinary college students who are supposedly intelligent can start to fill out these roles, especially the guards, and how they start to play act as guards, and how the prisoners in their way start to become prisoners. And I think that Alvarez does a really, really nice job of really explaining that in a way with, even if you don't think the movie works, I think people understand exactly why the experiment went as badly as it did.
Yeah, I mean, it starts out, it's 1971, everyone's all anti-establishment. All the people who are signing up for the experiment want to be prisoners and not guards, because, fuck the man.
They have a line there that's like, nobody likes the guards. I don't want to be a guard. Nobody likes
So they don't want to be in control, they don't want the power?
Yeah, well, they just think it's, it's 1971, it's Vietnam, it's
anti-authoritarian.
Right.
But boy,
the
put them in authority and a whole other story.
And that's such a great line. I'm glad you mentioned it in the movie because it really does speak to the idea that everybody wants to think that they're the underdog.
That's right.
And that very quickly, one character especially decides, no, I'm actually enjoy being sadistic.
When you're the overdog, you're into it.
And especially when you have a sense, and I think this is also important that the movie kind of sort of speaks to, is that if you think it's sanctioned, if you think that there are people watching and allowing you to be a guard and to treat prisoners in a certain way, you have a sense that it's okay to act horribly.
Yeah, so a couple of things related to that really struck me. One, look, they're kids, so obviously I'm not giving anything away by saying at the beginning they're told, hey, you can't lay hands on them, right? So then you start thinking, imagine what guards do when they're allowed to lay hands on them. And then the idea that the people running the experiment, as they observe of themselves during the movie, very much become part of the experiment. They stop observing, they become the sort of corporate establishment that backs the guards. They don't go talk to the prisoners and say, hey, come on, guys, act more like prisoners. They say to the guards, act more like guards. Take control. They give them control. So the role that the prisoners have is sort of just diminished, and their humanity is reduced again and again and again. And the thing I want to disagree with you slightly on is that there's a group of people, I guess, who know something about it, but I think most people know nothing about this, nothing at all. And so, in even those who do, to see it firsthand, there is, to use your word, there is an intensity to large swaths of this film that I think it really sustains until the end. That stayed with me. I thought it was great and very powerful. The only thing is, you mentioned all these people and the fact that it's 1971 and they all have long hair. I did have definite trouble telling them apart.
Is that part of the point, do you think, that they are nameless and faceless?
I decided to go with that.
Okay.
Because especially the prisoners, because they dress the prisoners in dresses. I mean, they take away their masculinity as much as possible. And they have long hair, and some of them have beards, but there is a very much a sameness to them. And the guards, too. And the guards are all wearing sunglasses. They look like sort of, Reno 911 versions of prison guards.
Super troopers.
But again, it sends a message of authority to those prisoners that these guys are in charge. And on paper, why I think it's important to see is, on paper, I never quite got how this worked. But seeing it,
the flip totally makes sense.
Yeah, you get how this would happen. You would be, I think.
Okay,
I think you would really like.
Yeah, and I think that uniformity, I definitely think is intentional, because I think it also speaks to the fact that it was a coin toss in terms of who is going to be a prisoner, who's going to be a guard.
Yeah.
And I actually think it works really nicely. And I actually think it's intentional that there is a sort of a uniform, handsome whiteness to everybody, both the prisoners and the guards. There is a sense that everybody kind of just becomes this sort of like this vague person in the prison.
The movie never tries to sort of fob it off on there's a bad apple. No, we're all bad apples. We all have a bad apple inside of us that could be unleashed in this sort of circumstance.
To that vein, there's I don't think this gives anything away, but I'll give it a shot anyway. But there's one guard who's clearly bothered by the behavior the entire time, but he just sits with that behavior.
Yeah, we never see it.
He never says stop. He just sort of...
Because they have to have group think? Is that what it is?
I guess that's the suggestion.
You don't want to rock the boat.
He just sort of turns away and mopes. I wish my buddies weren't doing this.
Okay. And real quick along those lines, it's Michael Angarano.
Angarano.
Yeah, I feel like he's one of the real revelations in this film. I mean, he's been acting he was in Almost Famous 15 years ago.
Yeah, he was in Red State.
I mean, he's been in a bunch of
Wild Card.
stuff, but I feel like nothing as good as he is. He plays sort of the principal guard in this. And I think the transformation that character goes through is really. So one of the things I love about the performance is that there is never a sense that that's who he is in real life, but there's something about him kind of adopting this southern redneck accent, where he's almost playing.
He's doing Cool Hand Luke.
Yeah, he becomes Brother Martin.
Yeah, and in some ways he's playing a role, and there's almost a sense that, well, I'm not being this terrible person. I'm playing a character.
Sure.
I think it's a really great performance. Ezra Miller, who's also in Trainwreck, Ezra Miller, I think, is really, really great as one of the prisoners.
Yeah, no, this is the dynamite. Like the Spirit Awards every year give out that Robert Altman Award, which is like for the best ensemble, and they honor the casting director and the filmmaker. This is a prime candidate for that award because it's such an amazing ensemble.
Okay, well, people who can give numbers, what are your numbers? Ben, what's your number?
9.
What is your number, Tim?
I give it an 8.
Okay, Alonzo gives him a number. So
I can't give a number, but I will say, if I didn't like this movie, I wouldn't be talking about
there
it.
you go. There's a clue.
So let's let Alonzo do the math.
Alonzo, what's the math?
What is it, a 9?
One's a 9, one's an 8.
As Fellini would say, it's 8.5.
So it's 84% on the tomato meter. Bye.